Welcome into a special edition of ACC Baseball Etc, presented as always by Academy Sports and Outdoors. In honor of their service and support for our country, Academy Sports and Outdoors is providing 10% off for military, veterans, and first responders in-store or online through July 4th. You can always enjoy free in-store pickup on online orders. Redeem your 10% off at your local store with a valid military, veteran, or first responder ID or online at academy.com/discount. Exclusions apply. Again, it is academy.com/discount for details. Happy off season. Our first episode since the conclusion of, or since we wrapped the season, Danny and I did last week after the Men's College World Series. I'm Daron Vaught, and I've got one of our, I'm using air quotes, James, new guys in the ACC. There are 3 new head coaches. We talked about it last week. We know all of you guys, so this is kind of fun and easy for us. It is the new Georgia Tech head coach, James Ramsey. JR, good to see you. I know you're in the Cape as we speak, right? It's very Cape-ish decor for those watching behind you. How are things going in the first, couple weeks with the head coach label?
Yeah, Daron, first off, thanks for having me. It's an exciting time. So I think just kind of trying to hit the ground running, which is a lot of the same, right? It's familiar faces. It's our roster that we feel really good about. Coming up here to the Cape to see a bunch of them that are playing up here, I think is just a great gesture, getting to see them in a new uniform and playing against a lot of other, really great players. I think I told them, when I've been kind of sitting with them and watching them, that this is a huge opportunity. I mean, that they should be really grateful for. I think that if you look at the Cape Cod or just summer ball in general, I mean, roster numbers the turnover is incredible with the portal. I think you're seeing a lot of guys pull the chute, and leave early. And that's something that, we've had a really good reputation about, especially once again on the positional side. It's a little different than pitching. You may not, have an innings limit. So I've told those guys, man, they need to come play. I think they want to play professional baseball, which if you come to Georgia Tech, that's one of the reasons you're choosing is, our great lineage of MLB players, right? And so I told them, hey, these scouts, these decision makers, they want to see a guy that loves to play baseball. And I think at the end of the day, regardless of what happens, the Cape is obviously the best league. And I think it says a lot for us to have as many guys as we have up here.
Yeah, I want to dig into your being named the successor for the legendary Danny Hall there at Georgia Tech. This look, I mean, you know how this goes. On the media side, we know you guys. We have our ideas of who's going to be an ideal candidate for what, where they might be good, but you never know until it's done, right? Like we all sort of felt like it was a foregone conclusion that you would be named the next head coach at Georgia Tech. Was that the case from your perspective? I know, I mean, obviously it might not be that easy on the team side.
Yeah, I think, you look at, having multiple different athletic directors over my tenure here, the constant obviously being working for Coach Hall. When you're able to work under someone like him and you've got his vote of confidence and the more as time went on, got more and more responsibility here. I think it was, a tribute, in my mind to the families that signed up for this, knowing that there wasn't anything specifically in writing, there wasn't any backroom handshakes other than, to your point, it's the same reason that Coach Hall speaks about, hiring me here. It's done everything from playing career in this conference, not just from the field, but being, conference, player of the year, academic player of the year, getting a degree, going into professional baseball, being a first round pick, being the college player of the year. It's like you check a lot of the boxes playing wise. And then now, been able to put a new stamp from a coaching element, which is, running some of the best offenses in college baseball, recruiting at a high level, making sure that once again, the academic side at Georgia Tech, we've had, great GPAs and guys that go on in the MLB, to make debuts in a short amount of time. But then it's like the NCAA tagline, right, of going professional in something other than sports. I mean, we've got incredible alumni. I think that, kind of wraps it in where the resume kind of just played its way out. I think that's kind of the easiest way for me to say it. And looking back on it, it wasn't always easy at times saying, hey, you guys got to trust that, this is kind of the way it's going to play out. But I think it validates a lot, looking back at it now, getting the job, there's nothing that, I didn't earn, I feel like, to be in this spot. And I think that's where, just it was important too, to mention that keeping the staff on board, and keeping the roster intact, and, to be as seamless as that was, to not see any names, pop in the portal, or not see any people that, panicked about it. And then once again, you always know once you get the job, everybody says what they say, but in today's era, you see guys, there's 5-6 days left, whatever it is, to enter the portal. I think it says a lot about the culture that we're building, and it's a player-driven culture. And so at the end of the day, we'll talk, I know, about the incredible players and leadership we have on this year's team. But, all of that, just to wrap up that answer, is it was just a lot of trust in the community here to know that the program is heading in a great direction, and there's still more to be accomplished, and, have a vision for doing that. And I think ultimately administration felt like, it was kind of a slam dunk.
One follow-up. Yes, for sure. Your guys love playing there. It is clear as day when you watch the team this past season, especially. It just seemed like a group that had a lot of fun. There's a ton of buy-in with each other. So that's clear as day. And I'm excited. I'm thrilled for you, A, just to get this opportunity, but B, to have the returners that you're going to have next year for this first foray into your head coaching career. It's cool. James, you and I are roughly the same age. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You'll be 36 by the time next season rolls around, right? Okay. By my estimate, I did a quick inventory. I know Moose is maybe a little older than you at Duke now, but I think that makes you the youngest head coach in the ACC by a lot compared to most of these guys, right? Because you're dealing with Danny Hall contemporaries across a lot of the league. Do you think about that at all in kind of venturing into this?
Not really. I mean, I think that you do have to step back and, be grateful for the people that trust you, right? I think those are the ones that ultimately have more, answers to the table. I think being a first-time head coach is something that, I haven't thought a ton about. I mean, that's the reality of, this is my first time completely running an organization. I go back to, really even into travel ball, into high school baseball, playing multiple sports, and feeling like you speak to people kind of in the past that have been around me or coached me. I think it's being servant leadership kind of comes up as was an innate thing that I think, is blessed to kind of have some of those things naturally. And then I think, the nurture side of, I think I really work to figure out what do great leaders do, what do people want to follow. And if you look at, 5 different pro organizations and then getting into coaching, just being in the people business, I think that's the thing that no matter what the age or experience level is, I do think that the qualifications have kind of checked a lot of boxes along the way. And then, to your point, like that's the biggest thing for me is if you want to talk about, hey, what does a James Ramsey coach team look like? I think we talk about having our players' backs all the time. Like at the end of the day, if they feel like you have their back, regardless of batting average, regardless of, what transactionally they could do for you. I think that's a big thing. And how you show that is the time invested and the energy you put into it and the passion. And I think those things that are pretty authentic, if you spend time around our program, like that's a constant theme. It's, running around with the players. It's joking about, being able to still get some hits. If not too long, I can still pull that card. Right. So, but I think those things are what you kind of go back to, and the age and experience for me. I think I got accelerated, doing what I did in my playing career that put me in rooms early in my draft class, kind of being one of the first guys to go to each level. And pro ball speeds you up, right? Like just in terms of you're playing around the most elite talent in the world, like you have to find solutions to problems really fast. And for me, from the playing side, kind of the accolades that follow, like I wasn't the highest recruited player or tangible skills weren't always the best. But I think that was kind of the thing that I've had to do from a younger age is figure out what is my separator. And part of it was I had to just play with my hair on fire every day. And, once again, like to put myself in the positions, really proud of that. And I think the same thing in coaching, you got to hustle. And so, getting here to put our recruiting classes where they are, we've had to out hustle some people. And so I think that's something that'll continue as well.
There's a lot there that I'll circle back on. You've mentioned your playing career at Florida State, Player of the Year. You played for the late, great Mike Martin. What about your coaching tendencies? And maybe some of this is still to be determined because you don't know exactly how you're going to be a head coach yet. What about your coaching tendencies do you think are like 11 residue?
Yeah, I'm going to probably, do a bad job name dropping a bunch here in the next couple minutes. But I think so you go Mike Martin, 11, kind of the legend. And, first off, people tell you got to be yourself, right? When you're a coach, you have to lean into your personalities. I think Mike Martin's side was he had what I would describe as a perfect blueprint to how to build a championship team, right? And so he had his framework and, he would always talk about it's about us, right? So, however, it was his game plan that he knew was successful, and no one's ever won, the number of games and the consistency of games. But it was, man, like if you were 7-8-9, you're going to take 0-0, you're going to take 2-0, you're going to take 3-1, you're going to bunt, you're going to, stand on the plate and get hit by pitches. Like, I think all that is incredible, right? Like there's so many ways from the practice planning that, was old school, but there were so many like really good principles of skill development that Mike Martin did, right? I think you go to working, under Danny Hall, where, he's the ultimate players guy. He's going to roll you out there in the lineup. He's going to keep writing your name in there. And sometimes that's better than any hitting drill you can do, right? Is just to know that the head coach has your back. I go to, Mike Matheny was the first manager of the Cardinals, and he'd walk the outfield. And it was always so like, you felt like that guy was in the trenches with you. And I played for Mike Schilt all the way up in the minor leagues, super process driven. It was the yellow pad sessions he had with taking notes on the games. And it would seem monotonous at the time doing it 140 something times in the minor league season. And I know he's carried that through to some level in the big leagues. And so, you go around, up and down of the major league organizations, they kind of have been around and great leaders and managers, played, alongside a lot of guys that are coaching in the big leagues now. You have to just take little pieces of them. And so, for me, in looking at the blueprint of how do we win national championships and how do we win conference championships, and we had, the youngest and probably least experienced ACC team this year and won the championship. How do we do that? I think it is digging into what guys can do to make you successful, not just plugging them into the puzzle, right? But I also think that if guys need a lot of help and you got to protect them on the mound or at the plate or on defense, I think we actively have to find ways that we use, whether it's the data or technology or whether it's gut feel. I think that we've done a really good job of making that kind of a hybrid. And so I've learned under a lot of great people. I've played alongside a lot of incredible players. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just being a sponge and learning more about what they do and then trying to apply that while also not just cut and pasting and thinking it's going to work at Georgia Tech.
At what point in your playing career did you think that this might be a thing? Like coaching generally, becoming a head coach at the college level? Like, how did you process that all? Because, I mean, you had an interesting career in that, from 2012 to 2018 in the minor leagues. You got into the coaching thing pretty quickly after. Again, I mentioned your age. Like you've ascended in these ranks with a speed that doesn't normally happen. So I think that would stand to reason that you got to the wheels turning on this pretty early.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I mentioned earlier. Like you go back to giving speeches, for teams, and whether it's high school football, being a captain, whether it was, college baseball, teammates used to kind of joke about it. They're like, man, not say I'm going to be the next 11, but they're like, man, you're out there running the pregame speeches and getting the guys fired up. And I always joke with the guys now, they'll pull up the old YouTube videos and send them in the group chat, kind of just the Omaha speeches or whatever. And I think that I love the game and I love relationships. And I think that's where, people always say the whole, sayings of, it's not work if you love it. But I truly do feel like I kind of embody that of, I just love being in the trenches with the guys and working. I love, the smack talk of competitiveness of, guys trying to outdo each other during BP. I love the clubhouse after a win. I mean, that's something that, once again, like our players hear every day. Obviously winning's hard and they hear all the sayings of hate to lose and love to win, but there's just nothing better than celebrating other people's success. I mean, I think that's the thing that, getting to be informed after we beat Duke in a tough series that we just won the ACC regular season title. was one of those feelings that just kind of rushes over you because you know all the moments that go into it. You have all these freshmen that we've played the last 2 years. You have recruiting Zooms that you tell guys we're going to win championships. And I think for guys to buy into that, and everybody wants to go to Omaha, right? Everybody, and how much can they do what it takes, right? And it's not just about effort, it's about the right effort. And I think it's cool to see that stuff come to fruition. So when you start to see that you're stacking the things that you want to do along the way, it is a process. And so, I think getting into coaching, it's one of those things where I don't know that I pegged it. I think I thought there was definitely a couple different roads through just studying, finance in school and wearing, the quarter zip, thinking I could be in the front office one day or whatever those things were. Being into coach now, I couldn't be happier. My family is all in, they love it. My wife makes a lot of sacrifices. My kids are all around the field. They're kind of like the team mascots running around. And, so I think that's the cool part is like work for us is an incredible blessing that we get to do every day.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, or you joked, I guess, that you're running out of days that you can sort of flex the playing career with guys. In all seriousness, I would imagine there's been sort of an evolution in your style coaching wise that has had to adapt over time with that, right? I mean, like when you first started coaching, I'm trying to recall maybe the first time you and I spoke, it would have been before me doing games there.
Yep.
In like 2021, like the way you talked to your players, even that season compared to this past year, there'd probably been some changes just because you're more experienced as a coach. You've got coaching experiences to lean on in addition to the playing experiences, right? How has that sort of ebbed and flowed over time?
Yeah, I think, everybody, I always say like the players are the ones that kind of try to open the yearbook, and just guys, baseball guys love to kind of talk trash, right? In a loving way. And so it's like, hey, looking back at different videos and equating it, I think, yeah, the evolution as a coach though is I still feel like I'll always be the guy that, never forgets how hard it was to play at a high level. And I think that instead of always saying, yeah, I did this, or, hey, this isn't that hard, it gets a lot easier when you stand over at that third base coach's box to take a slider or to, be on time for a fastball. And so I think that's where I always have to constantly remind myself that, yeah, at times it wasn't that long ago you're facing elite competition. But to your point, I think there's only so many things that like you can have the empathy of, hey, I went through this in my playing days, versus players love hearing stories and they love knowing struggles you went through. And I always remind them, like, as flowery as the resume at times might be, there was struggles and there was injuries and there was setbacks and there was trades and there was things that, I think one of the things we've had a, incredible run at is guys in their draft years have really never had a bad year, because I tell them I had one of the best draft days in the world. I had one of the worst draft days in the world. And so the pressure that you can put on yourself versus just investing in the team, I think that's the thing that, they need to hear from me. And then on the playing versus coaching, like experience, I think, yeah, our scouting reports continue to get refined. The drill packages and the things that we can talk to hitters and communicate them with, you have to simplify it because it's a world of technology. And I think we do a really good job of doing that. If you ask our players, it's, man, they are well educated on the things that professional baseball wants them to be educated on. But if they can't tell you their approach as they walk from the on-deck circle to the plate in a very succinct manner, then the game's too hard to do that. You can't be running calculations on pitch percentages from a 1-1 count to a 1-2 count. But if you have that gut feel of, this is how I'm going to be attacked, this is my strength, and this is kind of the dance that the pitcher and I are doing, I think players have a lot of success with that simplifying the game.
Yeah, I love that. Danny and I were just talking last week about, we've seen all these quick call-ups to the big leagues from our league, from college baseball as a whole, guys that played, just last year in a college uniform, making their major league debuts and making huge impacts. I think part of that is the alignment between the college game and the pro game. And it feels like you're a really good person to share your observations about this over time. It seems to me like we are closer as a game here at the college level to the major leagues than we've ever been. And you can take that however you want, right? Talent. But I think what you're alluding to, the approach, sort of what is valued in a player, in a team, that is closer to a big league evaluation as it was in the past. Am I making sense? Does that check out to you?
Yeah, I think the ceiling, right? Like you look at, make no mistake, the consistency, it's no different than when, guys go out and play golf and they have a good round. It's like you realize the guys at the highest level do that every time they tee the ball up, right? So I think that you look at the data you mentioned. I think that if you know what pro teams are attracted to, and that's an evolution. You look at, we were not that far removed from spin. We kind of perceive spin meaning movement, and the higher spin rate a slider had, the more it moved. And then, now it was, instead of induced vertical break, it was vertical approach angle. Instead of vertical approach angle, it was release heights on pitches. So I think you look at the sifting of that. You look at the end of the day, the same things that play at the big league level, always play, right? If you have those 5 tools, and then obviously if you have, the knack for approaches, as you mentioned, but I think you look at average velos versus median velos, and everything's rising, right? I think you do look at when hitters are at the top end of what they do, and you look at how much more does he need to do when the strike zone difference is not as different as it is. And I'm one of the hitting guys, I think, in the country that don't think we're in a great spot with how tight the zone is at times, and it would be okay with it getting bigger with some of the right misses at the right times, right? Strike 1 versus strike 3, like get the game, keep guys swinging the bat. But I think that's part of it. I think guys are, they're more physical, they're more specialized from day one. I do think, and I was talking with a scouting director, a guy that I trust a lot up here in the Cape yesterday, and we were talking about it. We're like, man, you look at times they're saying, well, the college draft is not as deep. And I think part of that is you see all these guys matriculating to 2 leagues, the ACC and the SEC. And so in the past, you would have a guy go in the 8th round that hit 330 at a mid-major with 12 to 15 home runs, right? He would play in the Cape. He would get that opportunity because he was the conference player in the year at a mid-major conference. Well, now you're seeing those guys first year, second year, third, at any point go to the big leagues. And if you're not playing every day, the opportunity to get drafted as high a ceiling as you want is not going to happen. And so, I think those are all things that major league, scouting departments are looking at. And I do think that's why you've continued to see the NFL, the, MLB drafts, like go to hey, if you can succeed in those 2 leagues, those league ceilings are as high as they've ever been. And if you are a top performer there, then yeah, you can go straight to AA.
Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. I was talking to a mid-major assistant coach earlier this year, and it fascinated me, James, with the way that they created batters' approaches, because the starting point was, let's look at the top wars in Major League Baseball and try to sift through it and see what makes these guys successful. And it struck me in that way. It's like, I guess it makes sense. It's baseball. Like, why would you not look for answers at the major league level? And it's a team that approach has been very, very successful for them. So it just kind of was like, you're onto something. It's simple, but it makes sense. And I don't know that college coaches were thinking in those exact terms, even, 10 years ago, looking to the major leagues for answers about how to succeed at their level.
Yeah. I think mechanics, like you'd always see those in the cages, like the pictures of like a hitting position. And I'm not saying that's not the way, right? But I think you look at, well, how did this hitter move? And I think now the skill of hitting is so much more based on, okay, if I look at what's happening on the mound to me, right? And how a guy's going to attack me, and the, ability to find my holes. And it's, you look at those, I think guys are really visual, and then they want to see it actually played out with someone doing it. You look at heat maps, those speak to guys. If there's a big red hole, they play MLB The Show, they know if there's a big red hole and you were scouting yourself and, you can't hit a fastball above 92, what is this guy going to do to you? Right. So going back to the approach of its swing percentages, its zone swing percentages, it's, can I make good contact? I think the other thing that we forget sometimes is, as players, we all want to develop, and we think that means my weaknesses. And I think there's another way of looking at it of, can you accentuate your strengths? And so you use that example of a team looking at big league. Why would you try to be someone you're not? If you are elite contact, then can we even make that contact tool better? If you are a power guy and you swing a ton, man, maybe you actually aren't getting to as much power. I mean, Drew Burress is, I'm sure we'll talk about him, but he's, one of the best players in the country. He's one of those guys that the MLB Twitter account, and I guess in 24 months, right, when he's a year into his pro career and he's in the big leagues, like you go back and look at it and you do those throwbacks to being at Georgia Tech. But he has such a mature way of talking about it. And as a coach, it'd be one thing if none of us like whiff in zone, none of us like chase. But if you just say we're not going to chase or we're not going to whiff, then a guy like him that every time he touches the ball, I mean, he swung the bat 4 times and hit 4 home runs in a game. So damage can happen every time he swings. But if he gets cross countered in a 1-0 and he gets a right on right change or something and he doesn't whiff in zone, maybe that's not a good thing. So I think that's where the pendulum is kind of swinging to old school, new school. Like we're kind of finding a middle ground where if I don't want Drew, swinging and missing just because the percentages tell me, whiffing is not good, but he would be in a better position to hit in a 1-1 count than anybody in America. I have to look at that hitter by hitter and say, yes, you do chase X amount in certain counts. So we absolutely need to train that, not just tell you that, because we've all been there, right? When a guy's going east-west, it's like, well, don't swing at the slider. And it's like, well, it looked like a fastball till it wasn't. So I think that's how you have to meet players where they're at with the data, and find ways to where it's not just numbers on a page, but it's something that they can draw back on in tough practice sessions.
Yeah. I'll stay on Drew because he obviously was someone we were going to get to anyway. What do you think is his best trait? This can be like physical, non-physical. What's the best thing about Drew Burress, the baseball player?
Just competitiveness and wanting to win. And, I think once again, we're talking about things that every good player has. I mean, the Last Dance documentary was on, I got back to the hotel late last night and I will never shut that off, like just because of what, Michael Jordan was able to do. And I do think there, once again, was it all stems from competitiveness, like staying in the gym. Drew takes as many swings as any player in the country. He does. And he has built up the capacity to do that from how he eats, what he does in the weight room, how he consistently shows up, and then how much he takes recovery into consideration. But he wants to win in anything. And I think that's like why we hit it off in the recruiting process. Cause I was the kid that at a young age, like, you want to win to where you almost want to flip the board game over and like, no one's, if I'm not winning and I'm out, like not trying to be a poor sport, but it's like, everyone has to have that. Yeah. And I think the other thing people would say about him is for being a superstar, because he is a superstar, you do not feel that way when you're around him. Like he genuinely cares about you. He genuinely doesn't want to talk about himself. And at the end of the day, he just comes back up and keeps saying that I just want to win. I just want to win. And so I think we've been able to attract other really good players, whether that's high school guys, whether that's transfers. Like he's going to consistently be the billboard guy for years to come. But let's not forget about the cast of characters and their development stories, as the years have gone along. And I'll forget guys, and there's too many to talk about, but a couple of the guys that, took huge steps forward for us in year 2 were Vaughn Lackey and Carson Kearse. And you talk about guys that, they're combined, the probably average OPS in league, between the two of them was in like the 500s to 700s. Right. And you're like, man, that is not a positive wins above replacement player, but they were in our system. Like we still felt like even as freshmen, they had incredible seasons. You stick by those guys, you put them in positions. And I give those two guys a ton of credit for coming in and saying, okay, I have to learn the type of player I am. And then I also have to learn to slow the game down. And, you look at both those guys who just had incredible seasons for us in their second year in the program, alongside Drew, alongside other players, you go, man, they're building something special. And then you add Hernandez and Daniel and Baker. And I mean, you go up and down the lineup. Kent Schmidt comes in from Southern and all he does is go from being a 330, something hitter in the Sun Belt to a 400 hitter in the ACC. Like that's just kind of what the torch has been passed down from guys. And that's why I mentioned kind of finishing up on Drew is there's that culture of you come in here, you get better, you pour into others, you go on to pro ball and you have success.
Yeah. Yeah. With Drew in mind, when Coach Hall and I spoke, when he arrived to campus, the thinking and Drew's intention was to graduate in 3 years before getting drafted. To your knowledge, is he on track for that?
He's still tracking. I think, that's the one thing that I had to remind him from a guy that, like had the ability to graduate early. I said, hey man, 4 3,000 level finance courses in the spring semester of your draft year, which I did. Like there's a little bit of sleepless nights at times, and I think that plays into it because you talk to kids all the time about the draft and leverage. And a lot of times it comes to money and it comes to like, that wasn't what it was about. But I think that there's something to be said about a guy that knows he's going to leave early and still knows that he doesn't want any unfinished business on the table from academics, from leadership, from winning. And, he does a really good job too of like not putting pressure on himself, but at the same time, he plays his best when you need him to play his best. Like there was something to be said about had to look him in the eye a couple of times. I'm like, hey man, like we need you. Like if we're going to go, you got to be the guy to do it. Where most coaching, sayings like, do not put pressure on your superstars, right? Don't put pressure on guys that have been famous since they're 14 years old. But that's kind of the X factor is he thrives off that. Like he really does. And he loves hearing it. And the teammates love it. It's get 8 to the plate is kind of the saying. And for us to do that at Ole Miss with our back against the wall, to have 2 guys get on base and set the table for him, he just missed basically twice hitting a homer. One was, a fly out and the other was a foul ball and got to the warning track and on the fly ball. And the whole team at the end of the day, same thing. Lodi's, ends up striking out with the bases loaded and a chance. Like you want those. And the guys at the bottom of the lineup, I think have done a really good job for us saying, I'm a guy too, and I can get the best players to the plate when they need to. And it speaks so much about just who he is. We want the ball in his hands when the game's on the line.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really well said. Look, man, I saw a lot of Drew last year at Team USA. Obviously saw him play in our league. So he's super impressive. Super impressive. He's a joy to watch. I'm glad we've got him for the one more year that we do. And I know he and you mentioned Vaughn, Hernandez, they're all headed to Team USA. That'll be a great experience for them. Did you, I imagine you lean on Drew's experience with it to sort of guide them and give them some advice or a heads up as to what to expect. Did you talk to those 3 about doing that this summer?
Absolutely. I think part of it, for Hernandez to be a freshman, is awesome to get that invite. You look at the freshman team last year and you look at mock drafts for, the next draft in 26 or even the sophomore eligible guys this year, they're all on there. I think that USA does a great job. And at the end of the day, like that's the thing that everyone in the country wants to do. There's not a single player in college baseball in my mind that probably ever has or ever would turn down the opportunity to wear that uniform. And so I told them too, it's a big deal. And you don't want to, once again, like Vaughn was the one whose eyes got starry eyed. I kind of was like, man, you need to walk around that you're the Team USA catcher. Like you're him, right? Like in Vaughn's words, like I'm him, man. Like, and I think it kind of sets in that those guys don't need confidence injected into them. But I think, there's so many accolades that have come those guys' ways now and in the future. They have to also appreciate, what special stuff they're doing to be recognized by USA Baseball to represent our country. And so I think that's kind of been the message for me is enjoy it, iron sharpening iron during those training days. Like don't think anything, but it's an awesome chance every time you get to step to the plate or you get to play defense or run the bases. And so I think they're definitely draw on some of Drew's experience, which was freshman team getting called up to the big leagues, right? He kept hitting homers and kept making plays in center and throwing people out. Like he became undeniable that you have to have this kid on the team if you want to win. And I think that's my message to them, that there'll come a time in your playing career that you're in Major League spring training and you've got to become undeniable that you're the option the front office needs to call up. And you look at Simpson and you look at Malloy and you look at Christian Campbell and guys that have got to the big leagues in a short amount of time, their farm systems decided that between Jay Henn's plate discipline, Simpson's bat to ball and his speed, and Campbell's all-around game, they were one of the best players in the world, and their front offices decided that those guys needed to help their major league team win games.
That's really well done. That's what the guys were talking about when they were talking about the pregame speeches, because you turned something that's like pressurized and you just made it empowering for the guys. That's I'm impressed. That's really well done. How I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Since being elevated to head coach, how have conversations with your pitching coach, Matt Taylor, changed?
Yeah, I think, I always joke, like, everybody has differences in how they, treat hitters, pitchers, fielders, whatever. I've always kind of been a cheerleader by trade. I remember there was times at Florida State where I remember one moment where we had, weekend rotation of, several guys that pitched in the big leagues, Luke Weaver and Brandon Lee Brandt, and they were all freshmen. We had an all freshman rotation. My senior year, had a freshman playing left field and right field next to me at Florida State. And I loved that. Like, I loved just being a cheerleader. And I remember backing up. I probably made myself back up second for some reason on a play just to get on the infield dirt to be able to empower the pitcher. I'm like, dude, you've got this. Like, just stop thinking about whatever you're thinking about. So I look forward to taking, a mound visit here or there, not just to make a pitching change, but to tell a freshman in the first inning of a midweek that he's super sped up, and is thrown 26 pitches in the first, and he's got a couple calls that didn't go his way, and maybe a guy kicked a ball or a dirt ball happened, and just remind him that it's going to be okay, right? Like that, you go back to slowing the game down. But Matt has done an incredible job at coming in and taking something that wasn't in the spot we wanted it in and not focusing on that, but just focusing on work and work winning, and a process that everybody says they have a process, but until it plays out and the results actually happen, you can't evaluate if it's a good process or not. So, we've joked about it. I think on the recruiting side, like, I love it. I love recruiting. I love getting guys, whether it's a hitter or pitcher, a defense first guy, and just saying, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to have your back. And I think that, there's everyone's natural reaction when something goes wrong on the mound is negative at times, because a pitcher is either going to be effective or efficient. And at some point, if he's, effective and until he's not, you take him out so that it doesn't feel good. Right. Or the rare instance that a player is effective and efficient is usually the only time that we're happy about a pitcher, versus you might get on a hitter for striking out 4 times. Okay. Well, those 4 times happen between a 2-hour span, versus a pitcher has 2 bad pitches or bad, at bats. There's no saving him unless you take him out. And so a lot of times you can compound the negative side on that side of the ball. And I think that's something that I've always tried to keep in mind, that, you're taking the ball from someone most of the time. You probably could have prevented it potentially by removing him from that situation, whether that's, I'm not saying we're trying to take adversity away from guys, but I think that's kind of going to be my general perspective to the pitching side of the ball is we have to remember, once again, as a hitter, you don't get a job done with a guy in third and less than 2 outs. You might get criticized in the moment, but then you get to go out and play D. You get to go out and do something else to help the team. If you're a relief pitcher and you come in and you hit a guy with 2 strikes and you give up a backside double at 80-mile-an-hour exit velo next to the foul line, the natural reaction from the people in the stands and is like, get this guy out. He didn't get the job done. I think those guys need a reminder to, there's going to be negatives when you get taken out of a game, but don't look at it any differently than a hitter that has an at bat. Those guys just get a chance to redeem themselves, but they get to slow the game down over 2 or 3 innings before they get a chance to help you win again.
Yeah, I'd love that outlook. That's another really good one. I want to finish with some nitty gritty stuff. You are taking the reins of this program in a very interesting time in terms of the broad scope of college athletics with the House settlement and roster changes and that sort of thing. Just from your perspective, this can be as general as you want it to be with the ability to offer as many as 34 guys. What's Georgia Tech's grasp on that at this point, with the understanding, of course, that it's probably going to be a moving goalpost for years, right? And you kind of have to do it on a year-to-year basis. But how are you as the head coach now wrapping your head around all of that?
I would sum it up that we have an incredible support system at Georgia Tech. And I'll go back to the school and the alignment with the president all the way at the top to committing to Georgia Tech athletics being, one of the things that puts Georgia Tech as one of the best academic institutions. Athletics still, people care about it a lot, right? It's a chance to get eyeballs on the institute. And then on the flip side, our alumni are as successful of an alumni base. It's 3 guys that have got $100 million contracts in the MLB, which is as many, I think, as anyone in the country or more. You have the number of guys that are running Fortune 500 companies that are, have started their own private equity firms or are surgeons, that they all want to see Georgia Tech be successful. And so from a monetary standpoint, we're not going to be the Yankees. We're not going to have this appetite for just buy, because at some point those guys chose Georgia Tech not because of money, right? They chose Georgia Tech because of money deferred to them through successful relationships with making connections in the school, business school, engineering school, whatever it is. So, and those people want to see Georgia Tech win championships because they won championships. So nothing that other than a national title, anyone that's played in this program has usually done those things over a 4-year span in their career. And so those people they have, wide open ears. They want to hear how they can help. They want to hear how we're going to navigate this environment. But once again, you have to lean into your strengths as a program and as a school. And for us, it's not trying to just find a guy to come in here and be a mercenary, right? A hired to just do a free agent deal. We want people that we've done a great job in the transfer market and a small number of guys, but guys that are constantly investing in the program, that are training here now that they're in pro ball. I think that's the way that we've had to look at it. So I think we're going to have to be strategic about, if it's 34 guys and everybody else has 34 or everybody else has 44, we got to make better decisions. We've got to, at the end of the day, I think coaching is the equalizer. And that's, everybody loves that development word, but until you can bring a guy in because you understood there's certain traits he possesses that you are uniquely positioned to develop that player, and then you hand that player off at later stages of their career, and then you're able to sell what you did with that player to the next family. I think that's the thing that I'll just keep going back to. Our alumni are incredible that played here, baseball or otherwise, and they're going to continue to support this organization at the highest level.
Love to hear it. Last thing for you. I imagine this was all sort of when you're handed those details and complications, that's kind of like a welcome to the head coaching seat, pal moment. Was there something specific in the first couple of days that was that for you?
Really, probably not. I think, Coach Hall did a great job of any meeting we were in, I was in, and the building of the future roster and the future way that we're going to go about it in this new kind of era. I definitely think that there is that interesting part where, it's almost like, people always say when you get engaged or something, like the fiance, it's weird to call yourself that, or you don't acknowledge yourself as that. So being the head coach, is something that don't take lightly, but, to be on the golf cart doing a tour, to be in the meeting room and kind of have the final word. I think those things are just, they're awesome. I think that's been the part of, there is more that comes across your desk. But I've always kind of tried to, lead and prepare for the job that you want. And part of that was, finding my blind spots and finding a staff over the last couple of years that could come in here and stay and absorb some of the things that I know I'm going to have to delegate, just on administratively or recruiting, different things. Everyone on our staff's been a recruiting coordinator before. And so that was something that's important, that there's going to be 4 of us now full-time on staff that have done it. It's looking at budgets and looking at, just roster management, looking at all that. I think that's the fun part, is we've got a really good staff in place and we're pulling together, and the players ultimately are the ones that are going to police things the way they want it policed. And they're going to, they know that the open door has always been there. And so I think that's kind of the cool part about, being handed the reins officially, is it's a great team to get started with, because it's hard to even pick a small group of leaders because these guys have done a good job spreading it out across the board.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate the time. Congrats again. We're excited to see you in that head coaching spot officially once we get games underway at the beginning of next season. It's busy times for you, I know. So good luck, safe travels, all that with the off-season agenda. And we'll talk again soon. Thanks, James.
Awesome, Daron. Looking forward to it, man.